The first thing she noticed was the ceiling. Cream, spilling into light, soft as breath. Air moved gently against her face. Machines hummed in patient rhythm. When she swallowed, the sound seemed too loud in the hush of the hospital suite. Then came the voice. "Evelyn?" It came from the doorway, low and cautious, rolling into the room like the tide. A man stepped forward, a tall figure in a navy suit whose composure felt both effortless and rehearsed. He crossed the floor with the quiet certainty of someone used to owning every inch of it. Broad shoulders, clean jaw, eyes the blue of cold water before a storm. He stopped beside the bed, his expression gentling. "It's me," he said. "Damian." The name met only silence. She stared at him, confusion spreading across her features. Fear flickered behind her dark eyes as her pulse raced. "Your hands," he murmured. "May I?" She didn't answer, but he reached anyway, his palm warm as it folded around her fingers. A diamond ring glinted on her hand, a stranger's proof of a promise she didn't remember making. He smiled, careful and contained. "You gave us a scare." "Us?" Her voice rasped, brittle from disuse. "Your doctor, the staff." He paused, then added, "Me." She searched his face for something. Recognition, warmth, belonging, but found only composure, polished smooth by habit. He noticed. The faintest flicker of unease crossed his eyes before vanishing behind practiced calm. "You were in an accident," he explained. "The doctor said it's a miracle you survived. Some memory loss is normal. It should pass." She looked down at the ring again, that heavy flash of diamond on unfamiliar skin, and whispered, "What? What is my name?" "Evelyn Hart Blackwood," he said. The surname fell between them like a signature carved in marble. Old, expensive, absolute. "Blackwood," she echoed softly. He nodded once. "You're safe, Evelyn." But safety didn't sound like this. Didn't look like white walls, saline lines, and a man she couldn't place. He offered water. She drank, trembling, and whispered thanks. "The doctors want you to rest," he continued. "Your memories will return. Don't force them." "And if they don't?" "They will," he said simply. "I'll help." He stayed there, silent but immovable, a sentinel carved out of money and control. The ocean outside the window moved in and out, its rhythm folding into the machines until the two became one heartbeat. "How long have we been married?" she asked at last. A pause. Too long. "Not long," he said. "We've kept it private." "Do I have family?" "Not nearby." Crisp, distant, rehearsed. He smiled again, gentler. "You love the sea," said it made the world make sense. She looked toward the horizon. The sunlight played across her bandaged temple, catching in the IV line. The woman reflected in the glass was beautiful and broken, a stranger wearing a wedding ring. His phone buzzed. He ignored it. "When you're discharged," he said, "we'll go home. It's quiet there. You can paint again." "Paint?" she asked. The words stirred something inside her, a scent of oil, the drag of a brush. Then it was gone. He leaned closer, voice low. "You can ask me anything," he said, "but not tonight. Tonight, you rest." He dimmed the lights until the room slipped into dusk. She closed her eyes, surrendering to exhaustion. Later, music drifted through the wall. A piano, low and sorrowful. The melody wove itself through the steady beeping of machines. She pressed the call button. The nurse came. "Do you hear that?" Evelyn asked. "Hear what, honey?" "The piano." The nurse smiled kindly. "No piano on this floor." When the nurse left, the water glass on the table was full again. She hadn't heard anyone enter. The ring on her finger caught the moonlight, scattering small constellations across the blanket. She turned her hands slowly, watching them move. The door opened soundlessly. Damian stepped inside, carrying the night on his shoulders. The tie was gone, 2 buttons undone, revealing the quiet power of a man unaccustomed to weakness. "I didn't mean to wake you," he said. "You didn't." Her eyes flicked toward the window. "Did you play?" His surprise was fleeting. "There's no piano here." He set something on the blanket, a silver chain with a crescent pendant. "You never took it off," he said. "It was in your things." She held it in her palm. The metal was warm, as though it had remembered her. "Sleep," he whispered. "I'll be here." "Will you?" "Yes." He drew the chair to the window and sat, a figure cut from shadow, watching the restless sea. The tide breathed, advancing and retreating. In that rhythm, she drifted into uneasy dreams. Rain, glass shattering, a man's voice. "Run, Eve." When she woke, the chair was empty. Only the crescent pendant remained in her hand, still warm, as if held there all night, by someone she could no longer remember. When the hospital released her, Damian Blackwood was waiting. The paperwork had been completed before she even signed her name, and the nurses treated him with the kind of reverence usually reserved for politicians or saints. His voice softened when he spoke to them, but authority threaded through every syllable. Outside, a black car waited at the curb, gleaming beneath the afternoon light. The driver opened the rear door without a word. Evelyn hesitated on the steps, clutching the pendant around her neck, as if the small curve of silver could anchor her in a world that didn't fit. The ride was silent. The city blurred by. Mirrored glass, distant cranes, the steady pulse of wealth. Damian sat beside her, his phone silent, his posture too still. He looked out the window with the quiet focus of a man calculating something only he understood. When the skyline thinned, the road turned toward the ocean. The mansion appeared like a mirage, 3 stories of glass and stone resting on the cliff's edge, the sea writhing hundreds of feet below. The house caught the sunlight and fractured it, scattering brilliance across the manicured gardens. "This is home," he said. She didn't move. "It's beautiful. It's yours." The driver disappeared down a side path, and Damian led her up the marble steps. The doors opened automatically, revealing a hall filled with quiet light. No photos, no clutter, everything sleek and intentional. It smelled faintly of salt and lilies. She trailed a hand along the wall, searching for any mark that might hold a memory. Nothing. A woman in a black dress appeared from one of the side corridors, a housekeeper, judging by her measured steps and folded hands. "Welcome back, Mrs. Blackwood." The title caught Evelyn off guard. She managed a polite nod. "Thank you, Marla," Damian said. "Make sure dinner is light. She needs rest." Marla inclined her head and left. The sound of her shoes disappeared like a whisper swallowed by the sea. Evelyn followed Damian through the hall, her eyes flicking from one minimalist painting to another. Colorless pieces that said everything about money and nothing about personality. "You painted," he said suddenly. "In the atrium." "I did?" He nodded toward a glass room filled with canvases, all turned away. "Your work." She moved toward them. The air smelled faintly of turpentine, dust, and forgotten time. When she turned one of the canvases around, she expected chaos, some explosion of emotion or memory. Instead, the painting was calm, methodical, the outline of a storm over the ocean, half finished, her signature at the bottom. The handwriting felt familiar. The image did not. "Why did I stop?" she asked quietly. "The accident," he said. "After that, everything changed." He said it like a fact, but the way his eyes flickered toward the window betrayed something else. She placed the painting back and let her fingers trace the curve of her pendant. I don't remember any of it. You will, he promised. When evening came, Damian showed her to a bedroom overlooking the cliffs. It was larger than the hospital suite, but the emptiness lingered. A king-sized bed, a white chaise, a view that stretched forever. And still, not a single photograph. Did we live here alone? She asked. Yes. No family? His jaw tightened. None that matter. The phrase hung heavy in the air. Evelyn looked out at the horizon, where the sea met the bleeding gold of sunset. It feels like a place that doesn't want to be remembered. He studied her for a long moment. You said that once before? He murmured. That startled her. I did? He smiled faintly. The first night we came here. You said the ocean looked like it could keep secrets. She forced a small laugh, though the thought sent a chill down her spine. Then I guess it's keeping mine too. Later, when she was alone, she explored. Her bare feet padded across the marble floors as the wind pressed softly against the glass. In one corridor, she found doors that led to empty guest rooms and another that refused to open. The locked one. She tugged on the handle, gently at first, then harder. Nothing. The sound echoed faintly down the hall. Evelyn? Damian's voice came from behind her. He moved quietly for a man his size, the edge in his tone unmistakable. You shouldn't wander tonight. You need rest. Her hand fell from the doorknob. It's locked. For a reason. His expression didn't shift, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop. What's inside? Storage. It was a lie. She could feel it, but she let it go. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, a tender gesture that didn't fit the coldness in his eyes. This house is full of memories, he said. Some doors are better left closed for now. She nodded, but her gaze lingered on the door long after he walked away. That night, the sound of the sea filled the mansion. The waves hit the rocks like distant thunder. Evelyn sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the ring glinting on her finger. Then she heard it again. The piano. Soft, mournful, drifting up from somewhere below. She followed the sound barefoot through the hall, down the staircase, past portraits of nameless ancestors. The melody grew clearer, a haunting waltz that trembled in the air like a memory trying to breathe. When she reached the bottom of the stairs, the music stopped. The grand piano in the living room sat open, moonlight sliding over its ivory keys. No one was there. Her pulse pounded. Evelyn turned slowly toward the shadows and whispered, Damian? Silence answered back. Only the sea moved, dark, endless, and full of secrets. Morning arrived, draped in pale gold, the kind of light that tried to make beauty out of emptiness. The mansion woke quietly, no footsteps, no hum of a busy house, just the distant rhythm of waves breaking against the cliff and the whisper of wind across glass. Damian was already gone when Evelyn stepped out of the bedroom. His side of the bed was untouched, sheets perfectly smooth, as if he'd never slept there at all. On the dresser sat a note in his precise handwriting. Breakfast is prepared. I'll return by evening. Don't strain yourself. D. His initials were sharp, deliberate, the kind that belonged to a man who planned every move before making it. Evelyn wandered through the house barefoot, the floors cool beneath her feet. She moved like a ghost through her own life, touching the edges of furniture she didn't recognize, pausing at walls that looked too clean, too curated. Marla, the housekeeper, appeared soundlessly at the end of the corridor. "Good morning, Mrs. Blackwood. Did you sleep well?" "I suppose," Evelyn said. "Do I usually wake up before sunrise?" Marla smiled politely, the kind of smile that gave away nothing. "You were never one for early mornings?" Evelyn studied her. There was kindness in the woman's voice, but something guarded in her eyes as if she'd been instructed what to say and what not to. After breakfast, Evelyn drifted toward the atrium again. Sunlight spilled across unfinished canvases, dust shimmering in its path. She found herself drawn to a small side table beside an easel, a drawer with an ornate brass handle. Inside lay a stack of sketchbooks, edges frayed, paper worn with time. She flipped one open. The first page held a portrait. A man. Not Damian. This one had darker hair, eyes sharp and familiar in a way that tugged at her chest. The strokes were softer, more intimate, painted by someone who had known the shape of that face by heart. She traced the pencil lines with her fingertip. "Who are you?" A faint headache bloomed at her temples. Images flickered rain against a windshield, headlights cutting through fog, a voice calling her name. She blinked hard, but the fragments vanished as quickly as they came. Marla's voice startled her from behind. "Would you like some tea, Mrs. Blackwood?" Evelyn closed the sketchbook slowly. "No, thank you." When Marla left, Evelyn slipped the drawing under her arm and carried it to the terrace. The sea stretched endless and merciless before her, sunlight glinting off the waves like knives. She couldn't shake the man's eyes from her mind. Her fingers clenched around the sketch. Why had she drawn him? Why keep it hidden? By afternoon, Damian returned. His presence filled the house like gravity, calm but heavy, pulling everything into its orbit. He found her on the terrace, the sketchbook open on her lap. "You found them," he said evenly. "You didn't tell me I used to draw someone else." Damian looked down at the sketch, not surprised, not angry, just thoughtful. "You used to draw everything. Faces, places, dreams. I didn't want to overwhelm you." She turned the book toward him. "Who is he?" He met her gaze without flinching. "Someone who hurt you." Her pulse quickened. "I don't believe you." "I don't expect you to," he replied quietly. "Memory is cruel, Evelyn. It paints the wrong people in light." He turned and walked inside before she could speak again. His footsteps were calm, but his shoulders were too rigid for his tone to match. That night, Evelyn couldn't sleep. The ocean hissed like a secret being told just out of reach. She rose and crossed to the window, looking out toward the black horizon. There in the reflection, something moved behind her. She turned sharply. Nothing. Only the faint shimmer of the piano's reflection in the glass. Then she noticed the sketchbook on the bedside table. It lay open, though she was certain she'd closed it. A single page was marked by a small fold. She approached it slowly. In the corner of the page, scrawled in hurried handwriting she didn't recognize, were the words, "Don't trust him." Her breath caught. The ink looked fresh. And from somewhere below, faint, almost too soft to be real, came the echo of the piano again. A melody slow, deliberate, and hauntingly familiar. It wasn't just a sound anymore. It was a memory trying to find its way back. By morning, the sketchbook's warning still haunted her. Don't trust him. The words looped in her mind like the echo of a dream she couldn't wake from. Evelyn sat at the long dining table, untouched breakfast cooling before her, while Damian read from his phone across the room. He looked immaculate as always. Black suit, cufflinks, every movement measured and deliberate. "You're quiet," he said finally, not looking up. I'm trying to remember, she answered. Then stop. His tone was soft, but there was steel beneath it. The doctor said too much strain will slow your recovery. You need peace. She smiled faintly, but there was no warmth in it. Peace or silence? He lifted his eyes to hers. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then, as if deciding the argument wasn't worth pursuing, he set his phone down and reached for his coffee. You used to love quiet mornings, he said. Did I? He nodded once. You hated noise, crowds, questions. A shiver of defiance ran through her. That doesn't sound like me. Damian's smile didn't quite reach his eyes. You've changed. When he left for his office later that day, the house seemed to exhale. Marla busied herself in the kitchen, the faint sound of dishes clinking against porcelain drifting through the hall. Evelyn wandered again. Past the stairway, past the window where the sea threw light into the room, and toward that locked door at the end of the west corridor. The handle was cold beneath her palm. She tried again, twisting carefully, locked, still. But this time, she noticed something new. A faint scratch near the keyhole, like someone had tried to open it before. When she leaned closer, the air around the door felt colder. She couldn't explain it. Mrs. Blackwood? Marla's voice floated from behind. Evelyn turned quickly, caught like a child doing something wrong. You shouldn't be here, the housekeeper said, her expression neutral, but her voice strained. Why not? Mr. Blackwood prefers this part of the house remain private. Evelyn's eyes narrowed. Private from whom? Marla hesitated, then lowered her gaze. From everyone. The answer chilled her more than the locked door. That night, Damian returned home late. His tie was loose, his jaw shadowed with fatigue. Evelyn sat on the terrace, wrapped in a shawl, the sea stretching endless beneath the moonlight. You're still awake, he said, stepping beside her. I couldn't sleep. He poured himself a drink from the decanter on the table. Bad dreams? I don't dream, she replied. Not anymore. He studied her, something unreadable in his gaze. That's good. You used to have nightmares. She tilted her head. What about? He took a slow sip, his eyes never leaving hers. Me. The words hung between them, too sharp to touch. Evelyn's hand tightened around her glass. You're joking. He smiled faintly. You always said I looked like someone who could ruin lives if I wanted to. Could you? She asked softly. His answer was a quiet breath. Everyone can, if they care enough to. They sat in silence, the sound of waves breaking below. Damian finally stood and said, You should rest. Tomorrow I'll take you to the cliffs. Maybe it'll help you remember why you love this place. When he left, the air he'd occupied felt heavier somehow, like his presence lingered even when he was gone. Evelyn didn't sleep. She returned to the atrium, drawn by the same pull that had haunted her since she woke in that hospital room. The moonlight cut through the glass roof, spilling across her old canvases. She picked up a brush, dipped it into faded paint, and stared at the blank page. Without knowing why, she began to draw the sea. But when her hand moved, the brush betrayed her. The lines curved not into waves, but into a face. The same man from the sketchbook. The man who wasn't Damian. Her pulse quickened. From the corner of her eye, she caught movement, something shifting in the glass reflection. She froze, turned slowly. Damian stood in the doorway, watching her. I thought you went to bed, she whispered. I couldn't sleep, he said. His voice was low, velvet over steel. You shouldn't be painting. The doctor said, I don't care what the doctor said. His jaw clenched. You're not ready, Evelyn. Not ready for what? My own life? His eyes darkened, the calm mask beginning to slip. You could get hurt again. From painting? She challenged. From remembering? The brush slipped from her hand. He took a slow step closer, his shadow stretching across the floor. There are pieces of your past better left buried, he said. Some truths destroy more than they heal. She met his gaze. And who decides which truths I get to have? You? He didn't answer. Instead, he reached forward, gently lifted the pendant from her neck, and turned it between his fingers. I do, he said quietly, until you can handle them. And then, just as calmly, he kissed her forehead, turned off the lights, and left her standing in the dark. The brush lay on the floor beside her, streaked not with ocean blue, but with a deep, dark crimson she didn't remember using. The next morning unfolded under a strange stillness, the kind that hummed beneath the surface of calm. The sea was a dull gray, the sky pressed low. Evelyn sat at the breakfast table, tracing the rim of her teacup with her fingertip. She hadn't slept. Damian had already gone, but his scent lingered in the air, a faint trace of cedar and expensive silence. Marla entered quietly. Mrs. Blackwood, would you like me to open the windows? Evelyn nodded absently. Please. As the curtains lifted, light spilled across the room, landing on something that hadn't been there before, a small flash drive placed neatly beside her plate. She frowned. Marla, did you put this here? Marla paused, glancing at the drive. No, ma'am. Her eyes flickered, betraying hesitation. Perhaps Mr. Blackwood left it? But Evelyn knew he hadn't. Damian never forgot, never left things casually lying around. Every movement of his was deliberate. When Marla left, Evelyn picked up the drive. It was unmarked except for a single word written in faint ink along its side. Wedding. Her pulse stumbled. The only wedding she couldn't remember. She carried it to the study, Damian's study. The door creaked as she entered, the air colder, heavier than the rest of the house. Shelves of law books, business journals, and polished awards lined the walls. Everything perfectly arranged, untouched by warmth. She sat at the desk and inserted the drive into the computer. The screen blinked, then came alive. A video file appeared. She pressed play. The image shook slightly, as if filmed by hand. Music played the faint hum of a piano, the same melody she'd heard in her dreams. Then the picture steadied. A church bathed in sunlight. Rows of flowers. Guests dressed in pastels, faces blurred by motion. And then, her. Evelyn. The bride. She gasped quietly, fingers tightening against the desk. She was radiant, smiling, alive, her laugh echoing through the screen. But the joy in her eyes was strange, hesitant, almost practiced. And beside her stood Damian, dressed in a black tuxedo, gaze fixed on her with something unreadable. Not love, not even pride. Possession, maybe. The officiant spoke, but the sound was muffled, distorted. Then came the vows, only snippets audible through static. Do you, Damian? I do. And do you, Evelyn? I... The word broke, as if the video itself refused to let her hear her own answer. Then came the kiss, or what should have been. Just as Damian leaned in, the screen filled with static. The picture trembled violently, the audio cracked, and a faint voice whispered through the distortion. He's lying to you. The whisper crawled beneath her skin. She froze, staring at the screen. Then, silence. The video cut to black. Her reflection stared back from the dark monitor, wide-eyed, trembling, her chest rising too fast. "Mrs. Blackwood?" She turned sharply. Marla stood in the doorway, eyes wide with concern. "Are you all right?" Evelyn forced her voice steady. "Yes. I thought I heard something." Marla's expression flickered again, that same mix of fear and pity. "You should stay out of this room," she said softly. "It isn't good for you." "Marla," Evelyn said, her voice low. "Who gave me this?" Marla hesitated. "It was on the counter this morning. When I came in, the front door was unlocked." "Unlocked?" "Yes, ma'am." The house was never unlocked. Damian made sure of that. After Marla left, Evelyn shut the laptop and slipped the flash drive into her pocket. That night, Damian returned late again. The moment he entered, she could feel the weight of his presence bending the air around him. "Rough day?" she asked lightly. "Long," he replied, unbuttoning his cuffs. His eyes found hers across the room, steady, probing. "You've been quiet again." "I watched something today," she said before she could stop herself. His movement stilled. "What kind of something?" "Our wedding." Silence, then softly. "Where did you find that?" "Someone left it for me." He approached slowly, eyes unreadable. "You shouldn't have watched it alone." Her pulse quickened. "Why? Was there something I wasn't supposed to see?" He smiled faintly, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Only ghosts, Evelyn. That's all the past is, ghosts waiting to be fed." He reached out, brushed his knuckles against her cheek. "Next time, tell me before you open things you don't understand." She didn't flinch, but her heart hammered against her ribs. "And what if I want to understand?" His fingers paused at her jaw. "Then I'll decide when you're ready." He took the flash drive from her pocket, she hadn't even seen him do it, and slipped it into his own. "Sleep," he murmured. "You need rest." Later that night, Evelyn crept downstairs. Damian's study door was closed, but light glowed faintly from beneath it. She pressed her ear to the wood. Inside, she heard his voice low, controlled. "Yes, she's starting to remember." A pause. "No, not yet, but if she keeps digging," the sound of a drawer closing. "Then we'll have to make her forget again." The words turned her blood to ice. Evelyn backed away silently, one hand over her mouth to keep from making a sound. When she reached her room, the sea roared below the cliffs, furious and endless. And for the first time since she woke in that hospital bed, she knew one thing for certain. Whatever accident took her memory, Damian Blackwood wasn't trying to help her remember it. He was trying to make sure she never did. Morning broke in gray light that barely reached the house. A pale fog pressing against the windows like breath on glass. Evelyn woke before the alarm, heart pounding, the echo of Damian's voice still chasing through her mind. "We'll have to make her forget again." She moved quietly through the hall, her bare feet silent on the marble floor. The mansion felt different now. It wasn't just cold, it was watching her. Every mirror reflected her too clearly. Every creak of wood sounded like a warning. Marla greeted her in the kitchen, startled to find her up so early. "You couldn't sleep?" Evelyn shook her head. "I heard something last night." "What kind of something?" "A conversation, in Damian's study." Marla froze, her hand tightening around the teapot handle. "You must have dreamed it, ma'am." "Marla!" Evelyn's voice sharpened. "Was there ever another woman here?" The question made the housekeeper flinch. It was quick gone in a heartbeat, but Evelyn saw it. I don't know what you mean, Marla said finally, pouring the tea as if the answer lay at the bottom of the cup. You do, Evelyn whispered. You just won't say. Marla didn't respond. She left the teapot, murmured an excuse about laundry, and disappeared. Evelyn sat for a moment, staring into the empty cup. Then she rose and walked down the west corridor again. The locked door waited at the end, dark wood, brass handle, a keyhole like a staring eye. This time, she was ready. From one of Damian's desk drawers, she'd taken a small brass key the night before. It was old, almost ornamental, and she hadn't known what it opened, but when she slipped it into the lock now, it fit. The door clicked open. The smell hit her first, faint dust, old paper, and something sweet, like wilted flowers. Inside, the room was dim, curtains drawn, a piano in the corner, covered with a white sheet. Her skin prickled. The same piano sound she'd been hearing for nights. Evelyn stepped closer and pulled the sheet away. Dust rose like smoke. The piano was beautiful mahogany polished to a dull glow. Ivory keys yellowed with time. A candle sat melted to its holder beside it. Someone had played here recently. She pressed one key. The note rang, clear and familiar. On the wall opposite, photographs hung in silver frames. She froze. Every frame held pictures of Damian smiling, laughing, standing beside a woman. Her. Except, it wasn't her. The woman in the photographs had the same build, the same soft curls, but her face was subtly different. Softer, lighter, eyes shaped differently, yet the resemblance was undeniable. Evelyn's knees weakened. She reached for the nearest frame and read the inscription at the bottom. Damian and Lila Blackwood, Paris 2018. Lila. The name burned through her mind like a spark. She'd heard it before, faintly, in one of her dreams. A voice crying out in the dark, a hand reaching for hers. Run! Eve! Evelyn staggered back, clutching the frame. Who are you? She whispered. A floorboard creaked behind her. She turned. Damian stood in the doorway. For a moment, neither of them moved. His expression was unreadable shock, anger, something darker flickering beneath. You shouldn't be in here, he said, voice low and controlled. Her pulse hammered. Who is she? He didn't answer. He stepped inside, closing the door softly behind him. This room is off limits for a reason. Why? She demanded. Because it's hers? Because she existed before me? Evelyn. You lied to me. Her voice cracked. You said we lived here alone, that we built this life together. But this... She gestured to the photographs, the piano, the dust, the ghost of another woman. This was her home first. Damian's eyes darkened. She's gone. Gone? Evelyn whispered. Or dead? He said nothing. The silence was its own answer. Was she your wife? He exhaled slowly. She was my past. And me? You're my present. The words should have sounded romantic, but they felt like a verdict. Evelyn took a step back. Did I know about her before the accident? His gaze sharpened. That doesn't matter now. It matters to me. He reached for her wrist. She pulled away. Evelyn, please, he said softly. You're still recovering. You don't know what's real. I know enough, she snapped. You loved her, and now you want me to replace her. The muscles in his jaw tightened. I don't want a replacement. She lifted the frame between them, her voice shaking. Then why do I look just like her? He hesitated, and in that hesitation, Evelyn saw the truth not in words, but in his eyes. You remember? She whispered. You knew the first time you saw me? He said nothing. She stepped closer, trembling. What happened to her? Damian's voice dropped to a whisper. She drowned. Evelyn froze. In the sea? He nodded once. It was an accident. Her throat tightened. Like mine? His eyes lifted to hers, and for the first time, she saw guilt, raw and unguarded, flickering through the calm. Before she could speak, he turned away and said quietly, You should never have opened this door. Then he walked out, leaving her alone in the room full of ghosts, the piano's keys still trembling from the note she'd played. When she finally dared to look down again, the photograph in her hand had slipped from the frame. On the back, written in the same looping script as before, were the words, He saved me once. Don't let him do it again. That night, the ocean sounded restless, like it too had something it wanted to confess. Wind rattled the balcony doors and brought with it the faint scent of rain. Evelyn lay in bed, her eyes fixed on the ceiling, replaying Damian's words over and over until they blurred together. She drowned. You shouldn't have opened that door. He saved me once. Don't let him do it again. The message on the back of the photograph burned in her mind, its warning impossible to ignore. Who was Lila really? And what did she need saving from? When Evelyn finally drifted into sleep, the dreams came fast and sharp. She stood on a pier, barefoot, the sea beneath her violent and alive. Rain lashed her face. A woman stood ahead of her, the same one from the photographs. Lila. Her hair clung to her cheeks, her dress soaked, her expression wild with fear. Run, Eve! She screamed over the storm. He's not who you think he is! Before Evelyn could move, hands grabbed her from behind. The world spun a flash of headlights, the sound of glass shattering, a scream swallowed by thunder, and then she was falling into the dark. She jolted awake with a cry, her heart hammering. Sweat slicked her skin. The bedroom was dark, except for the glow of moonlight spilling through the curtains. Her breathing slowed until she realized she wasn't alone. A figure sat in the chair by the window. Damian. His face was hidden in shadow, but his eyes caught the moonlight pale, watchful, unblinking. How long have you been there? She whispered. Not long, he said. His voice was calm, too calm. You were dreaming. How do you know? You said her name. The air froze between them. Lila? He didn't answer. His expression didn't move, but his knuckles tightened on the armrest. I saw her, Evelyn said. In the dream. She was trying to tell me something. Dreams are fragments, Damian said softly. Meaningless pieces of noise. Then why do they feel real? She asked. Because you want them to be. He stood, the shadow of his frame filling the room. You're confusing the past with the present, Evelyn. That's dangerous. For you or for me? His gaze lingered on her a second too long before he replied. Both. He turned and left without another word, the door closing behind him with quiet finality. Evelyn sat motionless, the sound of the ocean roaring louder now, as if the waves themselves were trying to drown out his voice. The next morning, sunlight couldn't chase away the unease. Damian acted as if nothing had happened. Over breakfast, he discussed the day's meetings, a charity gala, the architect coming to repair the terrace glass. His tone was precise, detached the perfect mask of normalcy. She wanted to scream. When he finally left, Evelyn returned to the locked room. The door was still open. Dust hung suspended in light like snow. The piano waited, quiet and patient. She sat on the bench and pressed a key. The same mournful note she'd heard in her dreams filled the room. She played again, tentatively, then another, until a melody formed soft, aching, familiar. Her hands moved on their own. Somewhere deep in her memory, the music was already written. She played until tears blurred her vision. When she stopped, the sound of footsteps echoed in the hall. It wasn't Damian. Marla appeared in the doorway, her face pale. "You shouldn't be here, Mrs. Blackwood." Evelyn wiped her eyes. "Did Lila play?" Marla's lips parted, but no words came. "She did, didn't she?" Marla nodded once, trembling. "Every night, the same song." "The one I just played?" The housekeeper's gaze darted to the piano, then back to Evelyn. "Exactly the same." Evelyn's throat tightened. "Marla, how did she die?" Marla swallowed hard. "The sea took her. She went out walking during a storm. They found her dress tangled in the rocks below." "And Damian?" Evelyn asked quietly. "What did he do?" Marla hesitated. "He built this room and locked it." "Why?" "To forget her," Marla whispered. "But some things don't stay buried." She turned to leave, but before she could step out, Evelyn asked, "Why do I look like her?" Marla froze. Then she whispered, "Because you're not supposed to remember why." The door shut softly behind her, leaving Evelyn alone with the piano's silence. Outside, waves crashed against the cliff, relentless, like a truth that refused to die. And as the echoes faded, Evelyn knew something now, not everything, not yet, but enough to make her blood run cold. Lila's story hadn't ended in the sea. It had only begun there. The invitation arrived wrapped in gold foil, the envelope thick and scented faintly of sandalwood. Damian placed it beside Evelyn's plate at breakfast as though it were a command rather than a question. "You'll come with me tonight," he said, not looking up from his phone. "The Blackwood Foundation Gala. It's been too long since anyone's seen you in public." Evelyn stirred her coffee slowly. "I don't remember ever liking crowds." "You didn't," he replied. "But people will notice if you stay hidden forever." She wanted to tell him that hiding felt safer, that every corner of her life already belonged to strangers, so why add more? But she only nodded, because defiance in front of Damian had a way of collapsing beneath his silence. When evening came, a black gown waited for her on the bed, velvet and silver, perfectly fitted to a body she was still learning to claim. The tag read, "Custom made." He'd planned this long before she ever agreed. Damian looked at her as she descended the staircase, his gaze sweeping over her like a sculptor assessing his own creation. "You look," he began, then stopped. "Like her?" Evelyn asked quietly. The pause that followed was too long. "Like yourself," he said finally, but the words didn't carry conviction. The gala was held in one of his hotels downtown, a cathedral of glass and wealth. Chandeliers glowed like captive stars. Waiters in white gloves moved through the crowd with silent precision. Every woman glittered. Every man looked carved from money. Damian's hand rested lightly at the small of Evelyn's back as they walked in. The gesture appeared affectionate, but it felt like possession. People swarmed to him, handshakes, congratulations, laughter that didn't reach eyes. She smiled when introduced, pretending not to notice the subtle stares. Whispers followed wherever she moved. "That's his wife? I thought she... Didn't she die?" "No, look at her. Same eyes though, isn't it?" Every fragment of gossip cut sharper than the last. When she excused herself to breathe, she found a quiet corner near the terrace doors. The city lights shimmered below like fallen stars. She was about to slip outside when a woman's voice stopped her. "You shouldn't be here." Evelyn turned. The woman was in her early 30s, elegant, her smile polite but brittle. "I'm sorry. Have we met?" The woman's eyes softened with something like pity. "No, but we've seen each other before?" Evelyn frowned. "At the hospital?" The woman hesitated. "No, before that, years ago." Evelyn's breath caught. "You knew Lila." A shadow crossed the woman's face. "We were friends. I didn't think he'd—" She stopped herself. "You really don't remember, do you?" "Please," Evelyn whispered, stepping closer. "Tell me who she was." "She was bright," the woman said quietly, "but trapped. The kind of woman who thought love could fix the walls she lived inside." Her gaze flicked toward the ballroom where Damian stood surrounded by admirers. "You look so much like her. It's frightening." "What happened to her?" The woman's lips trembled. "Ask him." Before Evelyn could say another word, Damian appeared beside them. His smile was smooth, charming, practiced. "Is my wife keeping you from your champagne, Miss Albright?" "Not at all," the woman said quickly, stepping back. "Just catching up." "Good," he said with a warmth that didn't match the warning in his eyes. "Enjoy the evening?" She nodded and disappeared into the crowd. Evelyn turned to him. "You didn't tell me she was Lila's friend." "I didn't think it mattered. It does to me." He leaned in close, his voice barely above a whisper. "You're shaking." "Because you scare me," she admitted. He smiled, though his expression didn't change. "You used to say that was part of the attraction." When the gala finally ended, the car ride home passed in silence. The city lights flickered across Damian's face, sharp lines of gold and shadow. "You shouldn't talk to people who want to rewrite your story," he said quietly. "Or remind me of it." His jaw flexed. "You think you want the truth. You don't. It hurts too much." Evelyn turned her face toward the window, hiding the tears threatening to rise. The glass reflected both their faces, his calm, hers trembling, and she couldn't tell which one of them looked more like a stranger. When they reached the mansion, Damian went straight to his study. Evelyn slipped away to her room, the sound of the waves crashing below like a warning. She removed her earrings, her necklace, then her heels. When she reached for the zipper of her dress, her fingers brushed something tucked into the lining, a folded note, small enough to miss. Her heart stumbled as she opened it. "You're not the first, and you won't be the last. Leave before he makes you remember." Her fingers shook. Downstairs, somewhere behind the locked study door, she could hear Damian's piano, the same soft, sorrowful song she'd heard in her dreams. Only this time, it wasn't haunting. It was a warning, played just for her. The next morning arrived drenched in mist. The world beyond the glass was blurred, the sea invisible beneath a veil of gray. Evelyn sat at the edge of her bed, Damian's music from the night before still ringing faintly in her head, that soft, deliberate melody that always stopped just before the final note. Her fingers brushed over the hidden note she'd found in her gown. "Leave before he makes you remember." She wanted to believe it was paranoia, but every instinct screamed otherwise. She dressed quietly, her movements mechanical, and wandered through the house while Damian was gone. The corridors felt longer than before, the silence thicker. She passed the locked room, now slightly ajar, its door breathing a faint draft of cold air. She didn't go in, not yet. Instead, she turned toward the study. Inside, sunlight filtered through the sheer curtains, striking the polished surface of Damian's desk. Every object was perfectly aligned, papers squared, pens parallel, nothing out of place. But when she ran her fingers along the desk's underside, she felt it. A ridge, slightly raised, like a hidden latch. She pressed. A small compartment slid open. Inside lay a leather-bound journal, crimson, its corners worn, its strap snapped in half. Dust clung to the edges as though it hadn't been opened in years. On the front, embossed faintly in gold, was a single letter, L. Evelyn's breath hitched. She opened it carefully, the leather creaking in protest. The handwriting inside was elegant, looping, familiar in a way that made her stomach twist. February 3rd. He says I remind him of someone he lost. Sometimes I think he only loves the echo of her, not me. Evelyn's eyes flicked to the next page. February 12th. I heard the ocean again last night. He says it calms him. I think it's the only thing that does. But I can't shake the feeling that something terrible happened there. The next few entries were crossed out in ink so dark it tore the paper. March 4th. He found the letters. He was angry. Said I shouldn't talk to anyone outside. Said they don't understand us. But I'm starting to think they do. Her pulse pounded in her ears. Every line felt like a heartbeat she wasn't supposed to hear. The final entry made her throat close. March 19th. If anything happens to me, don't trust him. A sound came from behind her, the faintest creak of a floorboard. Evelyn froze. She turned slowly. Damian stood in the doorway, his expression calm, but his eyes colder than she'd ever seen them. You found it, he said. Her voice trembled. It was hidden. Some things are, he replied, for a reason. He walked toward her, the click of his shoes too measured, too quiet. Evelyn took a step back. Why was this here, Damian? Why were you keeping her journal? He didn't answer. She was scared of you, Evelyn said. She wrote it down. Damian exhaled slowly, closing the distance between them. You shouldn't read things you don't understand. Then explain it. She was sick, he said flatly. Delusional. She saw patterns and shadows. I kept it to remember how fragile the mind can be. Evelyn shook her head. You're lying. I'm protecting you. From what? She demanded. The truth? His jaw tightened, and the calm in his voice began to crack. From the part of you that doesn't know what's real anymore. I know exactly what's real, she shouted, clutching the journal to her chest. And I know she didn't drown because of an accident. His face hardened. You need to stop. She met his gaze, defiance sparking through fear. Did you kill her? The question struck the air like thunder. For a heartbeat, Damian said nothing. His eyes didn't flicker. His expression didn't move. Only the faint muscle in his jaw ticked once. Be very careful with what you say next, he whispered. Evelyn's voice broke. Why? Because it's true? He reached out, not roughly, but with a kind of controlled desperation, and took the journal from her hands. You're tired, he said. Your mind is playing tricks on you again. Again? She repeated, her chest tightening. What do you mean again? But he only looked at her with that same cool pity that terrified her more than anger ever could. You've been here before, Evelyn, he said softly. You just don't remember how it ended. He turned and walked away, the journal still in his grip. Evelyn sank into the chair, her hands shaking. Outside, the fog began to lift, revealing the restless sea below the cliffs, the same sea that had swallowed Lila. And for the first time, Evelyn wondered if it had tried to take her once too. Rain fell in thin, restless threads against the glass that morning, the kind that blurred the horizon and turned the ocean into a breathing shadow. Damian was gone, or so the housekeeper said, though the faint smell of his cologne still clung to the hallways like an afterthought. Evelyn stood at the edge of the terrace, watching the waves hurl themselves at the rocks far below. Her reflection hovered faintly in the window, pale, exhausted, eyes too wide. "You've been here before," Damian had said. The words followed her everywhere. When she turned, Marla was standing behind her, holding a folded stack of linens. She looked nervous, her usual composure thinning. "Marla," Evelyn said quietly, "you've worked here for years, haven't you?" The older woman hesitated, then nodded. "Since before I came here?" Another pause, then barely audible. "Yes." Evelyn's heart lurched. "Then tell me the truth. What really happened to Lila?" Marla's eyes darted toward the staircase, as though expecting Damian to appear. "Please, Mrs. Blackwood." "Please," Evelyn interrupted, stepping closer. "If you know anything, tell me." Marla's hands tightened around the linens. "She was lovely, gentle, but restless. He kept her in this house just the same. The world saw the perfect couple, the charity galas, the magazine covers, but inside these walls..." Her voice trailed off. Evelyn swallowed hard. "He hurt her." Marla didn't answer, which was answer enough. "She tried to leave, didn't she?" Evelyn whispered. The housekeeper's eyes filled with guilt. "She said she was going to meet someone who could help her. The next morning, the storm came. They said she drowned." "They?" Evelyn pressed. "Who found her?" "Mr. Blackwood," Marla said softly. "He brought her home himself. Said the sea took her. After that, he locked the piano room and ordered us never to speak her name again." Evelyn felt her pulse hammer in her throat. "And then? He left for a year," Marla said. "When he came back, he wasn't the same. Then one day, he brought you here, and we all thought..." "What?" Evelyn demanded. Marla's voice broke. "We all thought she'd come back." Silence flooded the room. The storm outside grew louder, pressing against the windows like a living thing. Evelyn turned away, her stomach twisting. She didn't want to believe it that she was some kind of ghost, a replica of a woman she never knew. But the pieces fit too perfectly. Same face, same voice, same song. And then the memory hit her sudden, sharp. The flash of a mirror, a wedding dress, a voice saying, "You look just like her." She clutched the edge of the table, the room spinning. "Marla, I need to know who Lila was meeting that night." "I don't know, Mrs. Blackwood. She never said, just that it wasn't him." Evelyn nodded faintly. "Thank you." As Marla left, Evelyn caught sight of something in her reflection, a shape in the mist outside. For a moment, it looked like someone standing near the cliffs, watching the house. When she blinked, it was gone. That afternoon, Damian returned early. His suit was damp from the rain, his hair slightly disheveled. He looked at her as though nothing in the world had shifted. "Were you outside?" she asked. He smiled faintly. "Why?" "I thought I saw someone near the cliffs." He poured himself a drink. "There's no one out there, Evelyn. You know the storms make you see things." She wanted to scream that she wasn't seeing things, that the ghosts in this house were real, but the way he said her name made her voice die in her throat. Later, after dinner, she went upstairs to the library, hoping to find peace in the smell of paper and dust. That's when she found it, a second drawer hidden behind the bookshelf. Inside were letters, dozens of them, tied with ribbon. They were addressed to Lila Blackwood. But none of them were from Damian. The handwriting was bold, confident, intimate. I'm coming for you. You don't have to stay there anymore. Don't trust him. He'll never let you go. If anything happens, leave the painting in the piano room. I'll find you through it. Evelyn's hands trembled. She looked at the last letter, dated the day before Lila's supposed death. Tomorrow night, at the cliffs, when he's asleep. Her breath hitched. She whispered the name signed at the bottom. Ethan Vale. The world seemed to tilt. That name meant nothing, and yet it did. It thrummed somewhere deep in her bones, familiar and forbidden. Behind her, the floor creaked. She turned. Damian stood in the doorway again, his expression unreadable, his gaze falling to the letters in her hands. Looking for ghosts again? He asked softly. She didn't answer. He took a step forward, his voice a low murmur. Some things are better left buried, Evelyn. She met his eyes and whispered, Then why are they always finding me? For the first time, Damian didn't have an answer. And in that silence, Evelyn knew she wasn't just living in Lila's house. She was retracing her footsteps. The rain hadn't stopped for 2 days. It fell in slow, unending sheets that blurred the world beyond the windows and turned the cliffs below into moving shadows. The house seemed to breathe with the storm lights dimming and brightening as thunder rolled across the water. Evelyn didn't sleep. She couldn't. Every time she closed her eyes, the image of the letters came back: Lila's lover, Ethan Vale, the promise to meet her at the cliffs, the warning not to trust Damian. And now, the echo of her own accident, her own missing memory, pulsed louder with every drop of rain. When morning came, Damian was already gone again. A meeting, according to Marla, a business emergency. He hadn't told her where. He rarely did. Evelyn waited until she heard the sound of the car fade into the storm, then went to the garage. The keys hung neatly on the wall, labeled in precise handwriting. Mercedes hers. She hesitated only a moment before taking them. The drive down the coastal road felt like moving through a dream she half remembered. The cliffs loomed to her right, the ocean churning below. She drove slowly, her hands tight on the wheel, eyes fixed ahead. And then, halfway through a winding turn, the déjà vu hit her: the sound of thunder, headlights slicing through the rain, the screech of tires. Her breath caught. She pulled over to the side, heart racing, memories clawing to the surface. The world fractured. Flashes. The same road, darker night, a man's voice shouting her name, Eve, a hand gripping hers, the headlights of another car swerving toward them, the sound of shattering glass, the wheel jerking out of her hands, the scream that wasn't hers but someone else's. Then blackness. She gasped and clutched the steering wheel, eyes wide. The rain hammered the windshield, and for a second she thought she saw a figure standing at the edge of the cliffs, blurred by fog, watching her. She stumbled out of the car, calling out, "Who's there?" The wind whipped her voice away. There was no answer, only the ocean crashing below and the echo of her heartbeat. She turned back toward the car and froze. Someone was standing beside it. Damian. He was soaked, hair plastered to his forehead, coat dark from rain. His eyes locked on hers, cold and furious. "What are you doing here?" he shouted over the wind. "I remembered something," she yelled back. "The crash. I've been here before." He started toward her, the rain making his movements jagged and sharp. "You shouldn't have left the house." "Why, Damian? What are you so afraid I'll remember?" He reached her in 2 strides and grabbed her wrist. "This isn't the place for—" She pulled free. "It is. This is where it happened, isn't it? My accident. You said I lost control, but that's not true." His jaw tightened. "You were here," she shouted. "You found me." Lightning flashed across the sky, and for a split second she saw it in his face, the truth he couldn't hide fast enough. "You were with me," she whispered. "That night." Damian's silence said everything. Evelyn's breath trembled. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because," he said finally, his voice low and breaking through the storm. "You weren't supposed to survive." The words struck harder than the thunder that followed. Her stomach twisted. "What did you say?" He stepped closer, rain running down his face like tears he would never shed. "You weren't supposed to be in that car." She was. She stared at him, trying to breathe. "Lila." He nodded once. "Ethan was supposed to take her away. But you were with them. You—" He stopped himself, shaking his head. "You shouldn't have remembered this." The wind roared. Evelyn's heart pounded so loud it drowned out everything else. "You killed them." "No," he said sharply. "I tried to save you." "By erasing my memory? By pretending I was her?" The rain fell harder, his voice tightening. "You were dying. You had no name, no past. I gave you one." "You gave me hers," she whispered. They stood in the rain, the cliffs trembling beneath the weight of the storm. Damian's voice softened, almost a plea. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen. But you can't leave me now. You're all that's left." Evelyn took a step back. "You don't love me. You love the lie." He reached for her, desperate. "You are the lie." The ground beneath her heels shifted the edge of the cliff, slick with mud. She stumbled, catching herself against a boulder as lightning cracked overhead. "Evelyn!" he shouted, reaching for her arm. But she stepped away. "Don't touch me." For a moment, the storm held them both suspended, her trembling, him motionless, the sea raging between them. Then, without another word, she turned and ran for the car. Damian didn't follow. She drove through the night, headlights cutting through rain, tears blurring her vision. Her whole body shook, the truth unraveling faster than she could catch it. Behind her, the mansion waited on the cliff, a fortress built on secrets and ghosts. And for the first time since waking in that hospital bed, Evelyn understood. She hadn't been rescued from the wreck. She had been remade from it. Evelyn didn't remember the drive back. One moment, the cliffs blurred into darkness. The next, the mansion's iron gates loomed before her, black against the storm. Her hands shook as she shoved them open, shoes sinking into the rain-soaked path. Inside, the house was too quiet. The fire in the living room burned low, the faint scent of whiskey hanging in the air. Damian wasn't there. Marla appeared in the hallway, startled. "Mrs. Blackwood, you're drenched. What happened?" Evelyn brushed past her. "Where is he?" "He left again. He said not to wait up." "Of course he did," Evelyn muttered, voice cracking. She climbed the stairs 2 at a time, heading for the locked room. Her mind felt feverish, racing through every image she'd ever been shown, every lie Damian had told. Lila's face, the piano, the ocean, the car. But when she pushed open the door, something stopped her cold. The room wasn't empty. A soft light glowed from the corner, and beside the piano, sitting on the floor surrounded by stuffed animals, was a small girl. No older than 4, her hair dark and curling at the edges, her tiny hand tracing the ivory keys. The notes came out clumsy but careful, as if she already knew the tune. Evelyn froze. "Who?" Her voice broke. "Who are you?" The little girl turned. Her eyes were unmistakable blue-gray, the exact color of Damian's. Marla's voice came from behind her, breathless. "Please, ma'am, don't frighten her." Evelyn turned sharply. "What is she doing here? Who is she?" Marla hesitated, wringing her hands. "She shouldn't be up here. I tried to keep her downstairs, but she—" "Who is she?" Evelyn demanded again. Marla's silence was answer enough. Evelyn knelt slowly, her pulse roaring in her ears. "Sweetheart," she whispered. "What's your name?" The child tilted her head, studying Evelyn with quiet curiosity. Then in a small, soft voice, she said, "Leah." Evelyn's stomach dropped. Leah. The name Lila softened. Reborn. "Where's your father, Leah?" she asked. The girl smiled shyly. "Daddy's working." Evelyn's throat tightened. "Your daddy?" Before she could say anything more, Damian's voice drifted from the doorway. "She shouldn't be in here." Evelyn turned. He stood in the shadows, rain still glistening in his hair, his shirt clinging to him from the storm. His gaze went first to the child, then to her. "You never said—" Evelyn's voice faltered. "She's yours?" He nodded once. "Yes." "Yours and Lila's," Evelyn said, her tone trembling between rage and disbelief. Damian didn't respond. "You hid her from me?" Evelyn whispered. "All this time?" "I protected her," he said. "Protected her from what? From you." The words cut through her like glass. "From me?" she repeated, choking out a laugh that wasn't really laughter. "You think I would hurt her?" "You don't remember who you were?" he said quietly. "You think I erased the past because I wanted to forget Lila. But I did it because of you." Evelyn's pulse thundered. "What are you talking about?" He stepped forward, voice soft but fierce. "You were in that car because you went with her. You wanted to help her run. You called Ethan. You told him when to come." Evelyn shook her head. "No." "The crash killed them both," Damian said. "You were the only one still breathing when I found you. You were broken, bleeding, begging for help. You said you couldn't remember. I made sure you didn't." Her breath came in ragged bursts. "You think that makes you merciful?" "I gave you peace," he said. "I gave you a name, a home, a chance to start again. And a daughter who thinks I'm her ghost," Evelyn snapped. "Does she even know?" Damian's expression faltered. "She knows what she needs to." Evelyn looked at the girl again, her heart aching. "She's innocent in all of this. You can't hide her forever." "I don't intend to," he said. "She'll have the life neither of you could." Evelyn took a step forward. "You're delusional if you think—" He caught her wrist, not rough, but firm enough that she could feel the pulse beneath his skin. "Don't take her from me," he said. "Not again." She looked at him, tears streaming, and whispered, "You didn't save me, Damian. You built yourself a replacement." He flinched, but didn't let go. "You think I wanted this? You think I wanted to love you after what you did to her?" His voice cracked, and for the first time, Evelyn saw the edge of madness that had been hiding behind all that control. She yanked free. "If you ever loved either of us, let us go." He stared at her, breathing hard. "You can't go back to the world. You have no one out there. No name. No past." "Then I'll make one," she said. When she turned to the little girl, Damian didn't stop her. Evelyn knelt again, brushing a tear from Leah's cheek. "It's okay, sweetheart," she whispered. "I'm going to make sure you're safe." Leah smiled faintly, her eyes full of quiet trust. "Will you play the song again?" Evelyn's throat closed. "Someday, but not here." As she stood to leave, Damian's voice stopped her. "If you walk out that door, you'll remember everything." Evelyn turned to him, trembling. "That's exactly what I want." She took Leah's hand, and together they stepped into the hallway. The sound of the sea rising behind them wild and endless, as though it had been waiting years for someone to finally listen. The wind howled that night, as if the ocean itself were trying to speak. Rain battered the glass walls of the mansion, and waves slammed against the rocks below. Evelyn stood in the hall with Leah's small hand in hers, her heartbeat thundering in her ears. Every instinct screamed run, but where? The roads were flooded, and the only car was still slick with salt and mud from her earlier drive. Behind her, the house groaned, as if alive, its walls echoing with the same melody she'd heard from the piano. Slow, mournful, familiar. Leah tugged gently at her sleeve. "Mommy?" Evelyn froze. The word hit her like lightning. "I'm not," she began, but the child's face was so open, so trusting, that the correction died on her tongue. "Are we leaving?" Leah whispered. "Yes," Evelyn said softly. "We are." She led the little girl down the staircase, her bare feet silent against the marble in the flickering light from the chandelier, shadows twisted across the walls. Every step felt like trespassing into a memory she didn't want, but needed to see. The front door was locked. Of course it was. Damian had always been meticulous. Evelyn searched the foyer for the spare key she'd seen once the night she first arrived here, when he'd handed it to Marla. Just in case. It wasn't there anymore. She turned, ready to search the study, when Marla appeared from the side corridor. Her face was pale, her eyes wide. "Mrs. Blackwood, what are you doing?" Evelyn's voice was steady. "We're leaving, Marla." The older woman looked from her to Leah, her lips trembling. "You can't take her. He'll what?" Evelyn demanded. "Lock me in another room? Rewrite my life again?" Marla's eyes glistened with tears. "You don't understand what he's capable of." "I do," Evelyn said, her voice low and fierce. "Better than anyone." Marla hesitated, then pressed something cold into her hand. A key. "There's a boat," she whispered. "Down by the lower path, for emergencies. Follow the trail through the garden gate." Evelyn's breath caught. "Why are you helping me?" Marla's voice broke. "Because I didn't help her. Lila." Evelyn squeezed the woman's hand once, hard, then turned and hurried toward the garden doors, Leah clutching her tightly. The storm roared louder as they stepped outside. Wind tore at their clothes, rain stung their skin, and the sea below raged like a living thing. The path wound steeply down toward the cliffs, overgrown and slick with moss. "Stay close to me," Evelyn called over the wind. Leah nodded, her little hand clutching hers fiercely. Lightning flashed, illuminating the black water below and the small wooden dock at the base of the cliffs. A boat rocked against its moorings. They were halfway down when a voice cut through the storm. "Evelyn!" Damian's. She turned. He was on the terrace above, coat whipping in the wind, eyes wild. "Don't do this," he shouted. "You'll die out there." Evelyn's voice rose above the thunder. "You already killed me once." He started down the path after them, his shoes slipping on the mud. "You don't remember everything." I remember enough, she screamed. Leah clung to her arm as they reached the bottom. Evelyn pushed her into the boat, then climbed in after her. The waves pitched violently, but she managed to untie the rope with trembling hands. Damian was only a few steps away now, shouting her name, his voice breaking. She's your daughter, Evelyn! The world stopped. Evelyn froze, the rope half loosened in her hand. What? Damian stood on the dock, drenched, his eyes desperate. Leah's yours. Lila, she wasn't the one carrying her. You were. You both tried to run, and when the car went over, I thought you were dead. No, Evelyn whispered, shaking her head. That's not possible. You loved me once, he said, voice raw. You begged me to save you, and I did. I gave you another life. Rain lashed against her face. The world tilted. Fragments of memory flashed a small heartbeat under her palm. A man's hand on her stomach. A whisper in the dark. She'll look like you. Evelyn's breath caught. Leah whimpered softly. Mommy, please. The storm screamed around them. Damian reached forward, his hand trembling. Come back, Evelyn. We can fix this. You don't have to remember it all. Evelyn stared at him, then at the child clutching her coat. I do, she said quietly. Because the truth doesn't drown, it floats. With that, she shoved the boat away from the dock. The rope snapped, the waves catching them instantly. Damian shouted her name, but his voice was swallowed by thunder. The current pulled them farther and farther from shore. Evelyn held Leah close, her body shaking from cold and fear, and the terrible freedom of it all. Lightning flashed once more, and in that instant, she saw Damian still standing there on the dock, a dark silhouette against the storm. He didn't follow. As the cliffs faded into mist, Leah looked up at her. Mommy, where are we going? Evelyn stroked her wet hair and whispered, Somewhere he can't find us. But as she looked out at the black, endless sea, she couldn't help but wonder if the ocean remembered everything that had ever fallen into it, including her. And this time, she didn't know if it would let her go. The sea carried them through the night. The storm began to fade, but its memory clung to the waves, turning each one into a sigh, a whisper, a warning. Evelyn rode until her arms ached, until the wind died, and the only sound was the quiet creak of wood against water. Leah slept in her lap, her tiny fingers tangled in Evelyn's soaked sleeve. Dawn crept slow and silver over the horizon, painting the waves with cold light. For the first time, Evelyn saw her reflection clearly in the water, pale, bruised, hair tangled like seaweed. She looked like a woman who had lived twice and almost died both times. By the time they reached the shore, the sky was streaked pink and gold. The beach stretched empty except for driftwood and gulls crying in the distance. Evelyn half carried, half led Leah up the dunes until they found a small fishing hut abandoned, its door hanging crooked. Inside, she wrapped the girl in an old blanket and sank to the floor, her body trembling with exhaustion. But her mind refused to rest. Leah's yours. The words replayed endlessly. She wanted to deny it, to push it away as another manipulation, another lie. But the memories had already begun to bleed through, not like flashes this time, but like wounds, reopening. She saw herself months before the crash, the mirror reflecting a round belly, Damian's hand on her shoulder, Lila laughing softly behind the camera. You're glowing, she'd said. You'll be an incredible mother. The ache in Evelyn's chest deepened. Lila had known. She'd known everything, and she'd tried to get them both out. Now, only Evelyn and the child remained. When Leah stirred awake, her small voice was drowsy. "Mommy, are we going home?" Evelyn brushed a hand through her hair. "No, sweetheart, not there. We're finding a new home." Leah blinked sleepily. "Will Daddy come?" Evelyn's throat tightened. "No," she whispered. "He won't." But even as she said it, a part of her knew Damian would never stop searching. His kind of love was the kind that built cages beautiful, unbreakable, gilded with guilt. She couldn't risk it. By midday, she found a small coastal town a few miles inland. The streets were quiet, the air heavy with salt and baking bread. She bought clothes and food with the emergency cash she'd found hidden in the boat. No one looked twice at her. Just another weary woman with a child. That night, in the room she rented above a seaside cafe, Evelyn stood at the window and watched the ocean again. Leah was asleep on the bed behind her, her breathing soft and steady. Evelyn pressed her hand to the glass. "I remember now," she whispered. "All of it. The love, the lies, the crash." She remembered the exact sound of Lila's scream, the way the world tilted when the car went over, the cold weight of water filling her lungs. She remembered Damian dragging her from the wreckage, his hands shaking, his voice breaking. "Don't die, don't die, I can't lose you too." And she remembered the way his voice changed when she woke, how he'd realized who she was and who she wasn't. The ocean crashed in the distance, steady and endless. Evelyn closed her eyes. "Mommy?" She turned. Leah stood in the doorway, her small figure haloed by moonlight. "I dreamed of the sea," she said. "It was calling your name." Evelyn knelt beside her. "What did it say?" Leah's eyes were distant. "That you forgot something." A chill ran through Evelyn. "What, baby?" The child reached out and placed a hand over her mother's heart. "It said you left someone there." Evelyn's breath caught. The air felt suddenly too thin. Later that night, after Leah fell asleep again, Evelyn dreamed of the cliffs, but not the way she remembered them. The sea was calm. A figure stood at the edge, hair whipping in the wind. "Lila." She smiled faintly and whispered, "You found her. That's all that matters now." When Evelyn woke, the horizon was beginning to glow again. For the first time, she didn't feel like a ghost in someone else's life. She was alive. She rose quietly, went to the desk, and began to write. "My name is Evelyn Hart. Once I was Lila's friend. Once I was his wife. But before that, I was someone else, someone who loved too much and lost everything to it. Now I am the mother of the girl the sea tried to take, and for her, I'll never stop running." She folded the note and placed it in the journal she'd brought, Lila's red one, then locked it in the drawer. Outside, the tide shifted. The wind carried the faintest echo of a piano melody, soft, almost kind. The sea, at last, had given back what it owed. But in the stillness that followed, Evelyn couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere, far away, Damian was listening too. And smiling. The days passed quietly in the small seaside town. Evelyn learned to live in the in-between, the space between danger and peace. Between the person she'd been made to be, and the woman she was trying to become. Leah adjusted quickly. She laughed with the cafe owner's cat, made towers from seashells, and chased the gulls down the shore. Sometimes she would hum that same piano tune, her small fingers tapping invisible keys. Every time she did, Evelyn's chest tightened. The nights were harder. Every creak of floorboards, every sound of waves against the docks, made her heart leap with old fear. Sometimes she dreamed of the mansion, of locked doors and rain. Sometimes she dreamed of Damian, his voice soft, his touch steady, the kind of tenderness that had always come with chains. But she never dreamed of the crash anymore. Only the sea. Always the sea. On the fourth morning, Evelyn went to the post office. The clerk barely looked up as she asked for a phone. She hadn't used one since leaving, but now she needed to. She dialed the number from one of Lila's old letters, the only one that hadn't been ruined by water. Ethan Vale. It rang twice before a voice answered, rough, low. Who's calling? Evelyn hesitated. My name is Evelyn Hart. A pause. The sound of a breath caught. Say that again. Evelyn Hart, she repeated quietly. You don't know me, but I think you knew Lila Blackwood. The silence on the other end was heavy. Who are you to her? I'm the woman who survived. The phone line crackled. Where are you? Evelyn glanced toward the door of the little cafe where Leah sat with a croissant and a cup of warm milk. Somewhere safe, for now. He exhaled slowly. I looked for you, for both of you, but the paper said everyone in that car was dead. That's what he wanted you to think. Damian, Ethan said, his voice darkening. I should have finished what I started. Evelyn gripped the phone tighter. No, I don't need revenge. I just need him to stop. He won't stop, Ethan said. Not until he has you back. He doesn't lose things, he collects them. The truth hit harder than fear. Evelyn's voice softened. Then I'll have to become something he can't keep. Where are you? He asked again. She hesitated. I'll find you when I'm ready, Evelyn. But she'd already hung up. That night, the air turned cold and restless. The tide crept higher than usual, licking at the posts beneath the cafe. Evelyn tucked Leah into bed, then sat by the window, staring out at the horizon. Lightning flickered far out at sea. For a moment, she thought she saw something, a boat. Small, drifting closer. Her pulse quickened. She rose, opened the window, leaned out. The fog was too thick to see clearly. But then a light. A single sharp beam cutting through the mist. Not a fishing boat. A searchlight. Evelyn's breath hitched. No. She turned to the bed. Leah, she whispered urgently. Wake up. The child stirred. Mommy? We have to go. The beam swept across the shore now, closer. Evelyn could hear the hum of an engine, low and powerful, not a fisherman's vessel, but something bigger. She grabbed the duffel bag she'd kept packed beneath the bed, money, documents, the journal. She took Leah's hand, heart pounding. They slipped out the back door into the rain. The narrow streets twisted between stone cottages and flickering lamplight. Evelyn didn't dare look back. She could already feel the pull of the sea behind her, the echo of that melody Damian's melody carried faintly on the wind. They ran until the road ended in sand. The dunes loomed ahead, black against the lightning. Leah's hand trembled in hers. Mommy, where are we going? Evelyn crouched, cupping her daughter's face. Someplace new. Somewhere he'll never find us. From the cliffs above, a voice carried faintly through the storm. Evelyn. She froze. Damian's silhouette stood at the edge of the path, drenched, his coat whipping in the wind the same as that night. Leah whimpered, hiding behind her leg. Evelyn straightened, her voice trembling but strong. You'll never take her. I don't want to take her, he called back. I want to take you. You already did, she said. Lightning split the sky. For a second, she saw his face, clearly not rage, not triumph, but sorrow. Real sorrow. Evelyn, he shouted. You don't understand, the crash wasn't an accident. Someone cut the brakes. Her breath stopped. What? They wanted Lila dead, not you. And whoever it was. He took a step closer. They're still looking. The waves roared between them. Who? She yelled. Before he could answer, another flash of light sliced through the darkness. Not lightning this time, but headlights from the road behind him. A car, black, sleek, moving fast. Damian turned, eyes widening. Then impact. The sound was deafening. The car hit him and veered toward the cliff. The earth gave way beneath the tires, and both the car and Damian plunged into the sea below. The ocean swallowed the sound, then went silent. Evelyn stood frozen, Leah clutching her side, the storm howling around them. Mommy, Leah whispered. Where did Daddy go? Evelyn's voice cracked. He's gone, baby. But as she looked toward the churning water below, she couldn't help the thought that rose like a tide. She couldn't stop. Some ghosts don't drown. And if Damian Blackwood was one of them, she knew this wasn't the end. It was the calm before the next storm. The storm died with the sunrise. The sky turned soft and gold again, as if nothing had happened, but the sea was restless waves rolling and breaking, as though it were trying to give something back. Evelyn stood at the edge of the cliffs, her coat whipping in the wind, staring down into the churning blue-gray below. The spot where Damian had fallen was calm now, deceptively calm. No wreckage, no body, just the sea, silent as always. Behind her, Leah's small hand slipped into hers. Mommy, she whispered. Is Daddy sleeping? Evelyn swallowed hard, forcing her voice steady. He's gone, sweetheart. But the sea will bring him back, Leah said softly, as if repeating something she'd once been told. Evelyn's chest tightened. She looked down at her daughter Damian's eyes, her own mouth. No, she said quietly. Some people don't come back. But even as she said it, she wasn't sure she believed it. They left the coastal town 2 days later. Evelyn sold the boat for cash, bought a second-hand car, and drove inland. Every mile felt like breathing again, further from the cliffs, from the mansion, from the sound of rain on glass. By the third day, they reached a quiet valley town surrounded by hills. It was the kind of place where time moved slower, where no one asked questions as long as you paid in cash and smiled politely. Evelyn rented a small cottage with a red door and ivy climbing the windows. She introduced herself to the landlord as Eva Vale. The name felt strange, but it fit. That night, she watched Leah sleep again, curled up, thumb tucked beneath her chin, the faint sound of a hum escaping her lips. Evelyn recognized it instantly. The piano song, Damian's song. Her heart ached. She closed her eyes and whispered, He's gone. But the melody kept playing, faint and fragile, as if the house itself remembered. A week passed. Peace began to feel possible. Evelyn found work at a bookstore by the train station. Leah made friends with the baker's daughter down the lane. The days smelled like paper and coffee, the nights like rain and quiet. But the stillness never lasted. One evening, while closing the shop, Evelyn noticed a man standing across the street. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a dark coat and hat. He didn't move, didn't look away, just stood there, as if waiting. Her pulse quickened. She locked the door and turned off the lights, trying to convince herself it was nothing. But when she stepped outside, he was gone. The next day, she found a newspaper slipped under her door. It wasn't from the valley, it was from the coast. The front page headline read, Blackwood, magnate presumed dead in cliff crash, body unrecovered. Her fingers trembled as she read the smaller print. Authorities continued to search the wreckage, Investigation ongoing. Unrecovered. She set the paper down slowly. That night, she dreamt of the sea again, dark and endless, the sound of the piano rising beneath the waves. When she woke, the wind outside her window was whispering her name. 3 days later, she saw the man again. This time, in daylight. He stood by the edge of the market square, near the bookstall, pretending to browse. When she turned, their eyes met, and everything inside her froze. He wasn't a stranger. It was Ethan Vale. Older, tired, a faint scar running down his temple, but unmistakably him, the man from Lila's letters, the one who'd promised to save her. He walked toward her slowly, cautious, as if approaching a wild animal. "You really are alive," he said softly. Evelyn could barely breathe. "You found me." "I've been finding you for years," he said. "You just didn't want to be found." She swallowed. "You knew about Leah?" He nodded. "Lila told me before she died. She said if anything happened to her, I'd know who the child belonged to." His eyes softened. She was right. Evelyn looked away. "He told me I was her," she said. "He made me live her life." Ethan's jaw clenched. "That's what he does, turns love into possession." "Then why are you here?" she asked. "To save me? To finish what you started?" He hesitated. "To protect you." "From what?" "From whoever cut those brakes." Evelyn's heart stopped. "It wasn't him?" Ethan shook his head. "No, Damian wasn't innocent, but that—" He exhaled. "That wasn't his doing. The Blackwoods have enemies, and one of them knows you survived." Her voice came out a whisper. "How?" Ethan reached into his coat and handed her a small envelope. Inside was a photograph, grainy, black and white, taken from a distance. Evelyn and Leah outside the cafe, laughing. "Because someone's watching," he said. "And they've already found you once." The wind outside shifted. The church bells began to toll. Evelyn's fingers tightened around the photo. "Then we run again," she said. Ethan shook his head. "No, you can't keep running. It's time you learned who really tried to kill her." "Who?" Ethan's gaze darkened. "Damian's family." Outside, thunder rolled over the valley, low and distant, like the sea remembering its name. And somewhere in the distance, faint, almost lost beneath the wind, came the sound of a single piano note. Soft, familiar, calling her home. Rain returned to the valley that night, soft at first, then relentless, the kind that turned the streets into ribbons of water and made the hills look like ghosts crouched beneath the clouds. Evelyn sat by the window of the small red-door cottage, Leah asleep in the next room, while Ethan told her everything. He spoke slowly, his voice low enough to match the rain. "The Blackwoods aren't just a name on hotel walls. They own more than property. They own silence. Damian wasn't the first to hide things for the family, just the best at it." Evelyn turned from the window. "And Lila? She was supposed to marry into another fortune. The family didn't want her with Damian. He was unpredictable. When she found out what the Blackwoods were doing with their company's money laundering, offshore deals, trafficking contacts, she threatened to go public. Then the brakes failed. The words settled between them like ash. "So they killed her," Evelyn whispered. "They thought they did," Ethan said. "You were just the wrong woman in the wrong seat." Evelyn pressed a hand to her temple, memories flickering like lightning. Lila's laughter, the crash, Damian's arms dragging her from the wreckage. "He saved me," she murmured, "because he thought I was her." Ethan nodded. And when he realized you weren't, he couldn't let the truth out. The family would have buried both of you to keep their name clean. Evelyn's pulse raced. He told me he erased my memory to protect me. He wasn't lying, Ethan said. But he was protecting himself too. If you remembered, the Blackwoods would have finished the job. Evelyn's gaze fell to the photograph on the table, her and Leah, grainy, smiling. Then why now? Why find me after all this time? Because Damian's body was never found, Ethan said quietly. And his father wants what's left of the estate. That means proving you don't exist. Her blood ran cold. He's coming after us. Ethan met her eyes. He already has. Later that night, after Ethan left to make arrangements, Evelyn tucked Leah into bed. The storm outside raged harder, thunder echoing through the valley. The power flickered twice, then went out entirely. In the dark, Leah stirred. Mommy? Shh, Evelyn whispered, stroking her hair. It's just the thunder. But even as she said it, she heard something else, a sound that didn't belong to the storm. A soft knock, once, twice. Then, silence. Her heart stopped. She rose carefully, moving through the dark to the front door. The wind hissed under the frame. She hesitated, then whispered, Who's there? No answer. She gripped the handle and opened the door a few inches. Rain poured in. The porch was empty. Only the sound of the wind until she looked down. A single envelope lay on the doorstep, soaked through. Her name was scrawled across it in familiar handwriting. Evelyn. Her hands trembled as she tore it open. Inside was a single piece of paper, the ink smudged from rain, but the words were still legible. You can't hide from the blood you share. Leah is next. Her breath caught. She slammed the door shut, locking it, heart pounding. When she turned, the lights flickered back on briefly, and for just a second, she saw a shadow in the reflection of the window. Tall, still, watching. Then the power cut out again. Morning came gray and quiet, as though the night hadn't happened. Ethan arrived early, soaked from the rain, eyes tense. Evelyn handed him the note. He read it once, jaw tightening. This isn't Damian's handwriting. You're sure? Positive. He folded the paper. It's his father's. Evelyn stared at him. He knows where we are. Ethan nodded grimly. And if the Blackwoods sent someone, they're already on their way. Her breath shook. We can't keep running. Then we fight, Ethan said. We expose them. I still have the documents Lila gave me, the ones she died for. Evelyn met his gaze. And you think we can win? He smiled faintly. Maybe not, but we can make them bleed. That night, while Leah slept, Evelyn sat by the fire with Lila's red journal open across her knees. Near the end, written in fading ink, she found a sentence she'd never noticed before. If I die before the truth comes out, promise me someone will tell her what we really were. At the bottom of the page, a single word had been underlined twice. Sisters. Evelyn's breath hitched, her vision blurred. Lila wasn't just Damian's wife. She was family, her family. The reason she'd looked into those blue eyes and seen a reflection that made no sense. The reason Damian couldn't let her go, he hadn't just been trying to resurrect a lover. He'd been trying to keep both halves of the same bloodline under his control. Evelyn looked toward Leah's sleeping form, her heart breaking open all over again. The truth wasn't a wound anymore. It was an inheritance. And the Blackwoods weren't done trying to bury it. Outside, rain began to fall again, light, rhythmic, steady like piano notes across the roof. Evelyn stood, staring out the window into the fog, and whispered, You can come for me if you want." Her reflection in the glass was pale, calm, unafraid. "But this time," she said, "the sea won't take me. I'll drag them in instead." They chose to move on a calendar because momentum needed dates and deadlines and a rhythm that fear could not swallow. Ethan set one, a week from the day the shareholder meeting would convene at the Blackwood Tower downtown. He said the meeting would give them the stage they needed: cameras, lawyers, witnesses. "Expose them there," he told Evelyn in the small kitchen of the rented cottage, Leah asleep down the hall. "Make it public. Make it undeniable." Evelyn folded the plan into her bones like armor. She had no illusions about theatrics. She only wanted the ledger, the signatures, the paper trail Lila had died for. She wanted the truth spoken where people could read it and call it by name. She wanted the files that proved the breaks had been cut, the contracts that named the shell companies, the proof that the Blackwood fortune came from more than polite philanthropy. They worked in secret. Ethan called in favors of former journalist with a grudge against the family, a lawyer willing to sit on the evidence until the right moment, a quiet network of activists who smelled corruption like tidewater smells rot. Evelyn taught Leah to be quiet when men knocked on the door and to sleep through storms. At night, she read Lila's journal until the pages blurred, stitching together a woman she had been and a sister she now understood in bone and blood. The week crawled, and then it sprinted. On the morning they left for the city, Evelyn strapped Leah into the car and felt the small hand in hers steady her more than she could have imagined. "We'll be back soon," she told the girl, and the lie tasted like metal. Ethan drove. His face was a map of steadiness. Blackwood Tower rose like glass and intent. The family crest discreet at the top where it caught the sun. Security scanners, velvet ropes, men with earpieces who smiled and didn't mean it. They moved like any other guests on the list, Evelyn in a plain dress, Leah in a borrowed cardigan, Ethan under a borrowed press pass that smelled faintly of print ink and old coffee. The ballroom hummed with wealth. Cameras dotted the edges of the room like bright-eyed insects. The board's members filled a dais that looked palatial and antiseptic at once. Evelyn felt the house itself watching as they found seats, the same hush that once lived in the mansion settling into the hollow of her throat. They waited through speeches that praised philanthropy and sightlines, through the same old language the Blackwoods used to stitch reputation into money. When the chairman opened the floor for questions, Ethan rose, buttoned and composed. He did what he had to do to be legal and precise and above reproach. He asked for adjournment, cited irregularities in the financial statements, requested a special audit. The room rustled. The board protested. Cameras leaned forward. It was enough. While the board argued about procedure, a younger Blackwood executive, the kind of man who smiles too readily at the wrong times, disappeared to escort Evelyn to the records room, under the pretense of clarifying a minor entry. Ethan stayed behind, keeping the cameras warm, keeping the journalists curious. The records room smelled like old paper and the kind of cold that lives in vaults. Evelyn moved with the careful fury of someone who knows exactly what to look for. Shell companies, numbered accounts, invoices from places with no address. She rifled through folders, heart hammering as names came into view. Names she knew from the journal. Names that matched the signatures found in Lila's letters. Then she saw it. A ledger, leather-bound, marked simply, Operations Offshore. Her hands trembled as she opened it. There, in methodical hand, were dates, wire transfers, a line item that made her blood stop. Brake lines, 2 units shipment to Vale Road, approved by DB. Her fingers blurred. The letters swam, but the accusation was clear as a bell. She tucked the ledger under her arm and moved to scan it when the lights in the records room flickered once, twice, and then steadied. A sound from the corridor made her heart leap. Footsteps, hurried and uneven. Not the practiced, measured steps of Damian she remembered. These were ragged, broken, and they belonged to someone who had been running for hours. She turned. Damian stood in the doorway, drenched as if he had been dragged through rain, collar torn, one sleeve shredded. Blood darkened the cuff at his wrist. He looked nothing like the polished man at galas. He looked like someone who had been reduced to a single, furious purpose. For a moment, the world narrowed to the two of them. Evelyn's breath hitched. "You're dead," she said because it needed to be said. He laughed once, a sound without humor. "Not today." He stepped in slowly, leaning on the frame. His eyes were ringed with exhaustion. He was thinner, shadowed by something raw and human. "They tried to bury me," he said, voice a rasp. "They assumed the sea would do what dirt couldn't." Her hands found the ledger across his chest before she even thought. He did not stop her. "You shouldn't be here," he told her. "Not with her in your arms." Evelyn's grip tightened. "You hid her for years," she said. "You lied to me. You lied to her memory." He didn't argue. Instead, he shoved a small envelope across the table. Inside were photocopies, employee signatures, a short list of bank transfers. "I kept what I could," he said. "I couldn't keep the ledger safe in the house. My father would have shredded it. I slipped copies to a lawyer, a man I thought I could trust." Evelyn's eyes narrowed. "And?" He turned. Damian closed his eyes, a flash of pain crossing his features. "He sold me out. They issued orders. I ran. I burned the bridges I thought would save me." Ethan found them, then he'd left the dais and come looking, and his face went white when he took in Damian's condition. "You could have killed yourself," Ethan hissed, "or they could finish it for you." Damian's laugh was hollow. "I intended to let them think so. It quieted the searches, made wolves look elsewhere. But I couldn't die with nothing exposed. I couldn't be the last Blackwood to walk clean." The ledger lay between them like a lit fuse. Evelyn thought of Lila, of the red journal, and of a child with her eyes, and the way the sea had tried to keep what it took. "So why come here now?" she asked. He looked at her, and for the first time there was no mask, only a man ragged from truth and running. "Because if you don't put this on record, they will bury it again. They have the power and the lawyers. They have men who will make witnesses disappear. I wanted to give it to you." Thunder sounded somewhere outside the tower, as if the sky agreed. A radio crackled at the doorway, a security channel, a hurried voice. "We have a disturbance in records, possible unauthorized access." Ethan's hand went to the phone tucked in his suit. "That's our cue," he murmured. They moved as one. Damian, despite his wounds, guided Evelyn and Leah through a service corridor he knew like the lines on his palm. It was a map to a house only the family had lived in for generations. Passages, hidden doors, the back stair to the roof. They emerged into air that smelled like ozone and rain. Cameras spun below. A dozen figures scuttled like ants. Evelyn kept the ledger clutched to her chest. She felt something like victory, raw and dangerous and not yet complete. Behind her, Damian leaned on the parapet and looked at the city with a hardness that almost resembled peace. "Don't make me a martyr," he said softly. "Take the proof. Make them bleed. Make them remember." She looked at him, at the man who had loved a ghost and built a cage around what he couldn't lose, and felt an answer form in the place inside her that had once been hollow. She would not make him a martyr. She would make the Blackwoods accountable. As they moved to the elevator, men in suits and security guards converged below. The ledger was a burning thing in her arms. The week, the meeting, the plan, it had all been preparation. Now the real fight began. Outside, rain began again, a steady drum on the glass. And in the heartbeat that followed, amid sirens and the murmur of startled voices, Evelyn felt something else. The cool realization that once a truth is set floating, it does not sink easily. The city tasted of rain and static the day the ledger went public. Cameras hunted like gulls. Headlines bled across screens that had been dulled by wealth and habit. The Blackwood Tower rattled under the first gusts of real win questions, subpoenas, angry shareholders who had been content to trust whatever polished report sat before them. For once, money could not immediately muzzle every mouth. Evelyn watched it all from the back seat of a car, Leah asleep against her shoulder, Ethan running his hand along her knee with a steadiness that felt like an anchor. The footage from the records room looped. Evelyn in plain clothes, face set and fierce, clutching a ledger that smelled faintly of tobacco and old paper. Damian's appearance in the doorway, wild, wounded, impossibly human, had gone viral by noon. They hadn't expected him to walk into the room. No one had. That he had handed them photocopies and shoved the original across her lap like a confession and a dare, was the kind of thing that made for good cameras and complicated motives. Reporters wanted to know which part of him was the truth, the liar who'd locked rooms and rewritten lives, or the man who'd risked everything to expose his own. When the board convened for emergency votes, and media vans crowded the curb, an ambulance threaded through, and two men in dark uniforms led a stretcher into the hospital's ER. Evelyn's stomach tightened as the name they repeated under their breath, Damian Blackwood, landed like a stone. She went because she had to. Not for forgiveness, not for answers. For reasons she hadn't let herself feel aloud. Because once, in a life drowned and remade, a man had pulled her from wreckage and whispered her name until it meant something again. The ward smelled of antiseptic and lemon. Monitors beeped with the patient's slow, uneven rhythm. Damian lay white and small against hospital pillows, a smear of dried blood crusting his hairline, a bruise mapping the shape of an old life across one cheek. His chest rose with the effort of breath. The arrogant ease was gone, replaced by a brittle quiet. He was unmistakable even like this, the strong bone of his face. The winter blue eyes shuddered behind lashes, the scar near his brow like a memory he could not scrub away. He opened his eyes as she sat down, for a second only to look at the ceiling, taking the light as if it were a measure of something he'd owed the world. "You came," he said finally, voice a rasp that did not match the power she had once known in it. Evelyn did not answer. Leah peered from behind the curtain a moment later, hand tucked in hers, small and brave. "Hello," the child said without fear. "Daddy looks sleepy." She smiled with the sweetness of someone who did not know how complicated grown people things were. Damian's gaze found Leah, and for a pulse, something like wonder eased his features. He reached a careful hand toward a little curl at her temple. His movement was so tentative, it looked like a question. "You shouldn't," Evelyn began, then stopped. There were things she could not tell him, that she had wanted to run him through with words that would carve his lies into silence, that she had plotted revenge in 1,000 small, bitter ways. There was also the dirt-simple, unnameable truth that when his fingers brushed Leah's hair, the past rearranged itself in a new, painful pattern. Damian's eyes burned with a heat she had never learned to read properly. "Do you hate me?" he asked, raw and small in a sound that chewed on the edges of pride. Not anger, not accusation. Only an ache that had been held too long in the chest. The question surprised everyone in the room, even Leah, who blinked. Ethan stood back, jaw clenched, a lawyer's scowl tempered with something like pity. The monitors ticked their steady record of life between them. Evelyn let the seconds stretch. She had rehearsed a dozen answers in the dark. Accusations, cold facts, a polite dismissal. None fit the way his hand had trembled when he'd given them the ledger, or the way his face had gone slack when the car took him over the cliff and the world tried to close him out. "I don't know what hate would even mean after all of this," she said finally. Her voice was low, steadier than she felt. "You lied. You lied to me, to her, to a child who lost her mother. You made a life out of someone else's skin." The words fell clean and honest, not carved from spite, but from something purer truth-obliging speech. Damian swallowed. "You were dying," he whispered. "I thought..." His voice shuddered. "I thought if I made you whole again, I could fix what was broken. I didn't know how to do that without erasing a name. I thought I was saving 2 lives. I was only saving myself from the thing I couldn't bear. The idea that I had failed her." Evelyn looked at him, really looked, taking in the frayed edges of a man stripped of theater. The house, the locked rooms, the piano that kept playing beneath her skin. They had been his methods of keeping pain legible and small. He had done monstrous things from the place where grief mutated into control. But grief, in the end, is not an excuse. It is an origin. "You killed her," she said. It was not a sentence of accusation so much as a recognition of the arithmetic of consequence. "You didn't pull the trigger, maybe, but you let it happen without protest. You didn't save her. You built a silence around her." His shoulders shook. For a moment, the brittle shell of the billionaire cracked, and something human peeked through repentance or exhaustion. She couldn't tell. "You're right," he said. "I failed her. I failed you." Silence wrapped the room. Wheel clicks from nurses in the hall pressed against the curtains, like a reminder of the world outside their knot of grief and fact. "Do you remember?" Damian asked then, smaller, like a child asking permission. "Do you remember me? The man who pulled you from the water? Or will I always be the stranger?" Evelyn's throat tightened. Memory had returned to her in splinters and floods. Some images had the sharpness of shards, Lila's laugh caught between throat and breath, the angle of a wheel skidding, a hand finding hers in the dark, and some were gentle as fog. She had remembered enough to know the lie, and enough to know the cost. She stared at him and let the truth be what it needed to be. Not balm, not absolution, but the honest place to stand. "I remember," she said. "I remember the wreck. I remember the water. I remember you holding my hand and telling me not to let go." She swallowed the rest. "I also remember the piano, the locked rooms, and the way you thought you could stitch over a life with curtains and money." He nodded slowly, fingers finding the blanket's edge. "I deserve any hate you can give," he exhaled. "But there's something else I need you to know. I didn't do it alone. The ledger, my father signed things. The family," his voice gained a weary fierceness. "They made a choice. If we stop now, they win by burying it deeper." Evelyn felt the ledger's weight in her mind, like a physical thing, evidence that could not be smoothed away by wealth. For Leah's sake, for Lila's, for the woman who had been erased and the woman who had been reborn from her ashes, there was only one path left. Truth, ugly, and loud in the daylight. She looked at Damian, at the man who had broken her, and also, oddly, risked himself to break the family silence. "Help us," she said. "Not because I trust you, but because you can do the one thing you still can. Make them afraid." He closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, the small spark of something like commitment had been ignited. "I will," he said, voice thin but steady. "I will stand and tell the world. I will say her name and mine." Outside, somewhere beyond the hospital walls, the city roared with the noise of a family unspooling. Inside, Evelyn straightened, feeling an odd tether tangling between anger and a begrudging, dangerous compassion. She took Leah's hand, and the child squeezed back, small and certain. The ledger had lit a fuse. The Blackwoods would hiss and scrape and try to close ranks. But in a room smelling of antiseptic and lemon, with monitors marking the breath that kept a man alive, a different pulse began. The fierce, brittle beating of someone who had loved fiercely and wrongfully, and who had finally, impossibly offered the truth. It was not forgiveness she offered him, not yet. It was something quieter, a chance to be honest in public, to trade concealment for consequence. It was the beginning of a reckoning, and as she left the ward that afternoon, rain hiding the shapes of the city, Evelyn understood that hearts could be strangers and could also, in the right storm, become the place you returned to. The world didn't end with noise this time. It ended and began again with silence. Weeks after the trial, the newspapers still printed the story in fragments. Blackwood. Heir testifies against family. The empire falls. The woman who remembered everything. But Evelyn stopped reading after the first few headlines. Truth, she'd learned, was never clean. It came with splinters. The Blackwoods were stripped of their holdings, their patriarch arrested on federal charges. Damian's testimony cut through years of deceit, naming every partner, every buried crime. He'd done what he promised made them afraid. He didn't survive the aftermath. His wounds were worse than anyone knew. The day the hospital called, Evelyn took Leah to the sea. Not the cliffs of the mansion, another coast, quieter, where the tide hummed like a heartbeat instead of a threat. The sky was open, endless. Leah built a castle in the wet sand, while Evelyn stood at the water's edge, a folded letter clutched in her hand. Damian's handwriting, still precise even when shaky. "I once thought love was ownership. I learned too late that it's surrender. Tell her I'm sorry I taught her the wrong kind." The paper grew damp around her fingers. Evelyn read it twice, then let the wind take it. By sunset, the castle was gone, swallowed by the tide. Leah stood barefoot, watching the waves erase her walls. "Mommy, does the sea take everything?" she asked. Evelyn crouched beside her, brushing curls from her face. "No, baby, it only keeps what we give it." Leah tilted her head. "Then what does it give back?" Evelyn smiled faintly. "Sometimes, peace. Sometimes, memories. Sometimes a second chance." The little girl thought about that, then took Evelyn's hand. "Then let's give it something good." Together, they knelt at the edge of the shore. Evelyn placed a seashell in the water, small, perfect, unbroken, and whispered a name that no longer hurt to say. The tide pulled it gently away, carrying it out toward the horizon. Months passed. Evelyn built a new life the way she built her stories now, slowly, with honesty. The bookstore grew busier. Her name, her real name, appeared on the deed. Ethan stayed in the city, handling the remnants of the case, calling sometimes just to ask if the nightmares had faded. They hadn't, but they no longer owned her. At night, she wrote, not fiction, not yet, Just truths disguised as poems, letters to ghosts, stories for Leah. The child's laughter filled the house bright, constant, a sound the sea could never drown. Sometimes, Evelyn still dreamed of Damian. Not the cold version with power in his eyes, but the man who'd once stood on the dock and whispered her name through rain. In those dreams, he never said sorry. He didn't have to. The ocean between them had already answered for both of them. One morning, she woke to sunlight spilling through the window, and Leah humming softly that same piano tune, the one that had haunted the mansion. But this time, it sounded different. Lighter. Free. Evelyn closed her eyes, listening. The melody rose and fell with the rhythm of the waves beyond the window. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't afraid of remembering. She stood crossed to the open door and looked out at the horizon. The sea shimmered gold beneath the morning light, endless, forgiving, alive. And for a heartbeat, just one, she thought she saw someone standing far out on the rocks. A tall man in a dark coat, watching, not haunting, not waiting, just there, like part of the ocean itself. Then the wind shifted, and he was gone. Evelyn smiled. Goodbye, Damian. She turned back to the house, to her daughter, to the day that still waited. Because this was what survival looked like, not forgetting, but living beyond the storm. And as the waves rolled against the shore, the sea quiet, constant, faithful kept its promise.